this says for rectangles. So all three of these pictures, these are special types of parallelograms. So a rectangle, rhombus, and square, they will have the 5 attributes of a parallelogram. Attribute is a fancy word for properties. So they'll have opposite sides parallel, opposite sides equal, opposite angles equal, consecutive angles equal 180, and diagonals bisect. So all three of these pictures we're learning today already have those 5 attributes, which is why we spent a couple of days on them last week. They're really important. I really needed you to know them. So in addition to those 5 things of a parallelogram, you will also have all angles are right angles. So obviously opposites are equal. I put a little green dot by it, and I put the green 90-degree angles right here. So opposites are still equal. Opposites still add up to 180. And they're all going to be 90 for a rectangle. The other one that you have to memorize are diagonals are congruent. So not only do they bisect, but all 4 of these parts will be equal to each other. Okay, so when you make your little flashcard, try to start remembering all of these properties. So we have these 3, and then we have 2 more that we're going to learn next week. So you really need to get into learning these, okay? So make your flashcard, have these 2 properties on there. That's what's going to make a rectangle. So I have a couple of examples with a rectangle. So this little picture, they put a little parallelogram in front of it to tell you it's a parallelogram. It's not just a 4-sided figure. So parallelogram ABCD is a rectangle. They're supposed to tell you that. Don't assume. Then they're going to give you this information down here. So with this information, if AE, this part right here, is 3x and 2, and then BD, this entire thing, right here is 10x minus 14. We're supposed to find AC. Now, keep in mind, since this is a rectangle, all 4 of these are equal. So the entire thing AC will be equal to the entire thing BD. Okay, so when you have a picture, I would put in the properties you know about it. You know they're all 4 right angles like this. If you have 2 of them, that's enough to decide that all 4 of them are right. Okay, and then you also know that all 4 of these inside here are equal. So if that's 3x plus 2, this is 3x plus 2. Okay, and this entire thing would be equal to this entire thing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take 3x and 2 plus 3x and 2 and equal it to that 10x minus 14. Okay, you could also do 2, like 2 parentheses, 2 times the quantity, 3x plus 2, and distribute. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to get 6x and 4, and then just solve. So subtract the 6x, add the 14. Okay, and so you're going to end up with, let's see, 4.2, or 4.5, I'm sorry. Okay, so you're going to end up with 4.5 for your x, but that's not what it asked for. Always look and see what it asks for. So it wants AC, which means I'd have to plug in the 4.5 right there. So we can do 2 of them, or you can just plug them in and add them together. So it's just going to be like this. So 3 times 4.5 is going to give you 13.5 times, or add the 2 to it to get the 15.5 times by 2, and that's going to give you 31. Okay, so just keep in mind when you see a picture, that's why I need you to know the vocabulary like this. You need to know what's equal, or if you're going to be adding it to 180, those are kind of the big options for that. In this case, what did I just do? In this case, we had to do a little extra. We had to figure out that we needed to add them to set them equal to the other one. Okay, so in number 4 gives you angle DBC. So this one's a little different. A lot of times you set things equal to each other, but I gave you a few here where they're a little more difficult. So DBC, this angle right here, is 10x. And then ABC, so the big angle. So I'm just going to label that like this. So ABC, the big angle, is going to be 4x squared minus 6. Okay, so we got to worry about x before we find what they're actually asking for. So keeping in mind, like I said, label the things you know. So the things I know about a rectangle are that my diagonals are congruent and that all 4 angles are right angles. So what that means is if I need this whole entire thing right here, this is equal to 90. So I don't really need the 10x part. I can just use this part right here. Because if this is, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. I totally read it wrong. I read it as ABC. It's not ABC, it's ACB. So ACB, this one right here, is 4x squared minus 6. Okay, sorry. Restart that. So what's going to help me with this one are my diagonals. So this is going to help because if you have an isosceles triangle, so you have two equal sides, that means you have two equal angles. So that means these two things are going to equal each other. Okay, and then I'm solving for this. So this one's a little bit difficult to solve for. You have to bring back your factoring skills because I'm going to subtract the 10x. And now I have a quadratic. A quadratic just means you have something squared. So what you usually do when we did factoring, which has been since like August, it's been a while, you have to factor out a GCF if possible. Always want to do that first. So there is a GCF of 2. Okay, and then that 2 can just go away because you're going to divide it out. Then you have to factor this. So there's actually 2 different answers for that. Usually when you have an exponent of a 2, you might have 2 answers if you're making an equation. So in that case, you're supposed to do a times c. So that would be 2 times 3, which is 6. And you're finding factors of 6 that are going to give you -5. -6 that are going to give you -5. So what would work is going to be the minus 6x and positive 1x. And then you put your -3 in there. And this is how we're supposed to do grouping when we're doing that. So my factors of the -6 that give me -5, what I do is just replace the -5 with that 1 minus 6x, like I did right there. It doesn't matter which order you put them in. I put the 6 first. So then you have to do your grouping, unless you can do it in your head. If you can do it in your head, by all means. So then in this case, I've got to pull out GCFs. And then the blue one is just, it needs a placeholder. So even though there's no GCF, I need something in the place of that. And so when you finish factoring, you put your GCFs together. So we have 2 options for x. My 2 options for x, if I solve this, I'm going to get x is equal to 3. If I solve this, I subtract 1 and then divide by 2, I will also get a -1/2. So those are my options for x. They want to know what angle ACB is. So when you plug that in here, let's see what our 2 optional answers is. Oh, are, sorry. So I've got 4 times, let me scoot down a little. 3 squared minus 6. So this, make sure you do the squared first. So this is 9 times 4 is 36, minus 6 is 30. So 30 degrees. And if you did the half, -half, that's going to give you -5, which we don't want a -5 degree because it doesn't make sense to have a -5 for an angle. So we're just going to leave that one out. 30 degrees is going to be your answer for this. Okay, so this factoring, this is just kind of review. So just in case you see it again, we haven't seen it in a really long time, not even on the weeklies. So that's a good review for factoring when there's something in front of x squared. Okay, so you'll be able to find all the angles. So instead of putting a whole bunch of separate problems on here, I just put one angle. And if it is a rectangle, if it tells you that it is a rectangle, which I should have put that in the directions, it'll tell you it's a rectangle, you'll be able to find everything. So if that's 70, keep in mind, if it's a rectangle, the 2 things you know are that these diagonals are congruent and that all 4 angles are right angles. And both of those are going to be helpful in helping us find all these other angles. So 2 equal sides in a triangle, this triangle right here, 2 equal sides means 2 equal angles. So this is 70. So you can do that. Will also help you find this angle in the triangle because 180 minus 70 is 40, which will give me this one. Alternate interior angles are congruent. So that's 70. Same thing with 2 equal sides, 2 equal angles. You got a linear pair here. So 180 minus 40 is 140. Okay, and then down here, if since this is 90, these two angles are going to add up to 90. That's going to be an important one that you see a lot with the rectangles and the squares, is that when you have right angles, that these two will add up to 90. So 90 minus 70 is where this one is coming from. And this is also going to be 20, 20, 20, and 140 is 180. Alternate interiors, that works too. Okay, so you can find every single angle in there for that to work. Next, I threw two more of these in here just because they're difficult, just so we can have more practice with them. So with a rectangle, we know that opposite sides are equal because that's a parallelogram. So my length and my height are going to be the same. So if this one comes over to C, this one will also come over to C. It's going to be the same coordinate. So this is C0. This will be C something else. We need to find that something else as well. Now this height is going to be the same as this height. It's the same exact height, and my height is always my y value. So your coordinate C would be CA. And then one more of those. So same thing over here. This distance is going to be the same as this distance, is going to be the same as this distance. So since this one is over A, this one is over A. Okay, same thing here. So if this one comes over negative D, then this one is going to come over negative D. And then with the heights, this height is going to be the same as this height. This height is going to be the same as this height. So both of those are negative B. Your heights are your y values. So my height here is going to be the same as my height there, which is a C. Okay, so there's just a couple random ones that I wanted to throw in there in case you see them. So over here, this kind of gives you an idea of all the pictures that we're going to learn. So far, we barely talked about a quadrilateral. All I said before was a quadrilateral just was a polygon with 4 sides. So it just had 4 random sides. A special type of a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, where you have all those special things, opposite sides parallel, those 5 properties, attributes of a parallelogram. Today, we're learning 3 different kinds of parallelograms. So far, I just learned the rectangle. The rectangle had the diagonals congruent and the 4 right angles in there. Okay, a rhombus is unrelated to a rectangle. It's a type of parallelogram, and that's what we're going to learn next. And then down here, I put a square because a square is just everything in a rectangle and everything in a rhombus put together. So it's just a combination of the two. So today, all you really need to know is you need to know the 2 things of a rectangle, and we're about to learn 3 things of a rhombus, and then the square is going to have all 5. So you don't have to memorize the square at all. You just have to memorize the rectangle and the rhombus and know that the square has all of them. Okay, so square, rectangle, rhombus, special types of parallelograms. So of course, rhombus, it's got the 5 attributes of parallelograms, and then these 3. So all sides are congruent. So that's what I put with the red dot. I've got the red sides all congruent. A second one, diagonals are perpendicular. They are not congruent like the rectangle. They bisect still, so those 2 and those 2, because that's a property of a parallelogram. Okay, so all I know is they're perpendicular, so I have the right angle in there. Matches the green. And then the blue says diagonals bisect opposite angles. So this diagonal is going to cut this angle in 2 equal parts. Same thing here. So all 4 of these are equal. And same thing with the other opposites. Those 2 are equal, those 2 are equal, all 4 of these are equal. Okay, so with a rhombus, you can actually figure out a lot more because of that right angle in the middle. So if it tells you this is a rhombus, you can actually find all sides and you can find all angles. So when you know things, you may want to mark them. So I know that those are going to be right angles on the inside. I know that all my sides are equal. And I know that diagonals bisect. So this diagonal bisects this, which means this is 30. Okay, alternate interiors. And then the way I'm going to figure out the rest, you can do it a couple of different ways. You can do the 3 angles in a triangle, that's fine. Or this is 60. So for a parallelogram, that would make this have to be 120. It's 120 because the consecutives add up to 180. And then if you cut it in half, since it's bisected, you'll get 60. Either way works. So these are all 60s, and these are all 90s. So you have all the angles, but you can also figure out the diagonals in here. So remember that these are going to be congruent and that these are going to be congruent. They're not all going to be equal. So We're still bringing back the special right triangles. That's why we learn those first. You keep seeing those randomly come up. This is a 30, 60, 90. So in that case, this would be z. This would be z square root of 3. And this would be 2z. So back when we solved those, you could also use SOHCAHTOA. That's absolutely fine with these. If you were to solve for z, z would be 5. So this side is 5, which makes that 5. And then this side is 5 square root of 3. And in this case, I don't care about the exact, so you don't have to worry about the square root if you want. The decimal is fine for me if you want. So we were able to find every single side, every single diagonal, every single angle just from 2 numbers. Okay? So other problems, measures of the numbered angles in the rhombus. So opposites are equal because it's a parallelogram. And then if this is 100, that makes this 80 because consecutives add up to 180. And since it's a rhombus, this cuts it in half. So these would be 40. Okay. I didn't give a lot of examples because a lot of them are the same. So I went straight to a square. Square, of course, you have the 5 attributes of parallelograms and then all the rectangle and rhombus stuff. So all the angles are right angles. You have perpendicular diagonals, congruent diagonals, congruent sides, and diagonals bisect. So if this is 90 and it's bisected, every single angle in the square will be 45 degrees. Okay, so just from that one number right there, if you're told that this is a square, you can figure everything out. I just told you that all these angles are 45. So every single angle in this picture over here is 45. We know that these are going to be 90. So now I have a 45, 45, 90, which means this is 2z, this is z, and this is z. We also know that all these are equal because the diagonals are all congruent in rectangles and squares. So these are all 5s. And then this will be, the square root of 2z. This will be 5 square root of 2 for all my sides. So just from one number, you can figure out everything if you're told it's a square. Okay, just a couple more. I know it's kind of long today, but you don't get a video tomorrow, so you'll be good. All right, so they're going to ask you if it's a rhombus, rectangle, square, and explain. So in this, they tell you that SO is congruent to TP. So what they're basically saying is your diagonals are congruent. And since my sides are not congruent in this, this has to be a rectangle. And then you can just say congruent diagonals for your explanation. Over here, since my angles are not right angles, it cannot be a rectangle or a square. And I have perpendicular diagonals here. So this is a rhombus. Over here, it asks the same questions and to explain. Now, keeping in mind, if you have if it's a parallelogram, remember that opposites are equal. So if this has got that, it's going to match. If this has got that, it's going to match. So I have 4 equal sides. Same thing, parallelogram means opposites are equal. This is why the vocab is so important in this section. You got to know all these things. And consecutives add up to 180. So I have 4 equal sides, 4 right angles. That makes it a square. Okay, and then these down here are the same thing. So most precise name for it, this one down here just shows you 4 equal sides, and it's got opposite sides are parallel. So all that means is it can be a rhombus. I need to know something else, whether that has the angles or something about the diagonals to determine that it's a square. Over here, so I've got opposites parallel and opposites are equal. So for this, it's just going to be a parallelogram. Okay, those are the 2 attributes of a parallelogram. Opposites parallel, opposites equal. That's all that is. And then over here, I have opposites parallel and all 4 sides equal. This would be a rhombus. Here, opposites parallel and 4 right angles. So this would be a rectangle.